The main work that I've done in philosophy has to do with epistemology and identity, those two concerns in various ways. In epistemology, my first book was on coherentism and defending what I thought was a kind of a new version of coherentism that incorporated contextualism in it. And I argued that the divide between analytic and continental philosophers was overdrawn, that there's actually more commonality, that on many topics, analytic and continental philosophers are addressing similar issues with different textual traditions and sometimes different reading practices and methods of argument, but are ostensibly in the same conversation, and it would actually be useful to have that conversation across domains. I thought the analytic philosophers are very good at working through justification and ontology of truth, and continental philosophers don't always do that, but continental philosophers, I think, have brought in the domain of the social and sort of the real world, the non-ideal world of epistemology and knowing practices better. Now that has expanded in social and feminist epistemology, and I've been working in that area. The other main area I work in is on questions of identity, of social identities, particularly the identities of race and gender, but also ethnicity and other forms of identity. And this is a project in social ontology of how best to understand what these categories refer to, if anything, how best to understand how they operate. This work also connects to my interest in epistemology because I think identities can be correlated to certain epistemic issues, problems, as well as resources. And so how to think about that has been an interest. So I've argued for a kind of realism about both race and gender, which has marked my position differently from some of the trends in feminist theory and philosophy. Not because I think race is a natural kind, but it is a social kind with great real, very, very real implications. I think it's a historical formation too. I don't think these things are species of false consciousness or ideology that are foisted on the masses who are then duped by these erroneous concepts. I think they're a little bit more of an organic historical formation. So I try to give a philosophical characterization of what these are and what the political and epistemic implications of them are. They're constantly changing. It's not like they're fixed, but philosophers can contribute both in terms of offering more adequate concepts to explain these phenomena and engaging in the normative argument about what we should do with these social categories of identity for the future. Well, I have 3 book contracts. One is I'm working on the Rutledge Companion to Critical Race Philosophy with Paul Taylor and Lavelle Anderson. So we're trying to showcase the best work in critical race philosophy to show that it's a growing and important and legitimate subfield. Then I have 2 book contracts of my own work. One is due in a couple of months, and this extends my work on social categories of identity, and I'm focusing on the identity category of whiteness, which is under so much social contestation in the United States as our demographics change. Some people think whiteness will wither away, it will fragment. I'm arguing that it's not going away anytime soon, but it is obviously changing. I think it's undergoing as much ferment today as it did 100 years ago when Jews and Southern Europeans were sort of let into the club. and there was a lot of Sturm und Drang in that period, and we're seeing some similar changes in borders and conceptualizations in politics and political fragmentation. So I try to describe what whiteness means and think about it normatively in terms of future ways to think about the possibility of a whiteness that's not essentially tied to, you know, a racist or an idea that you're top dog or the vanguard of the human race technologically and morally and philosophically. And then the other book project is on sexual violence that I'm hoping to finish at the end of next year, where I'm thinking both about, I think the topic of sexual violence is really undergoing a lot of change as well. We're recognizing more institutionalization of sexual violence. It's not the random acts of pathological perpetrators, but it happens in churches and the military and wartime situations, and we're also rethinking our understanding of the experience, which is a very knotty topic of sexual violence. Young campus activists began to talk about the concept of gray rape, meaning borderline or ambiguous experiences, or a period in which a survivor may be coming to an understanding of her experience, a process in which she comes to decide how to name a particular experience. And some survivors have argued that the binary rape, not rape doesn't apply to their experience. So I think philosophers can actually help here, again, in providing some conceptual tools to make sense of these accounts. And I think if we're going to make it possible for survivors to speak out in public and enter the public domain of discourse as they're doing with their own names in the press, we need to be able to hear them. We need to be able to have the conceptual repertoire rich enough to account for the complexities that they speak about and the varieties that they speak about. And sometimes people don't want that. They want neat and simple categories that can be useful in the courtroom. But the public domain of speech, which is what I'm more interested in, is different than the courts. It can allow for more variety and nuance. It's not focused on establishing individual culpability, but achieving understanding toward reducing the incidence of the problem. And so in that domain of discourse, we can have an expanded conceptual repertoire beyond what the courts allow. So I'm working on that in the book, and also resistance, the question of resistance and how to make the speech of survivors, which is coming out in New Delhi and Cairo and Paris and London and New York more and more, how to make that speech the most effective politically and transgressive, and how to fend off the ways in which that speech is often very quickly disauthorized and manipulated so that it doesn't have the political impact that I think it should. I've been at the Graduate Center for a full 5 years now, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Actually, it's got philosophical resources in terms of faculty and students that are pretty unrivaled in terms of breadth and just sheer numbers, and quality as well. I teach courses in the philosophy department. I also teach courses that are cross-listed with women's studies here. The women's studies program is also an incredibly rich and large program with major figures in feminist theory and feminist work in the social sciences and literature here. So I have enjoyed having such students in my graduate seminars alongside the philosophy students. I think many of the philosophy students here, well, a number of them have an interest in feminist scholarship and feminist philosophy, and much of feminist philosophy does draw on interdisciplinary work in the mostly in the social sciences, some of course also in the neurosciences and other natural sciences, but mostly in the social sciences. I also have a relationship with the new certificate in critical theory here, which is a good space to do for those who are interested in continental philosophy, which is one of the main areas that I work on. They have, again, amazing resources and a lot of students who are interested in not just critical theory as it applies to comparative literature, but critical theory in a more general theoretical and philosophical sense. So I've done some work with them and hope to do some more work with them in the future.